June 5, 1944, 9:45 p.m. somewhere in southern England. The men of the 101st Airborne Division are standing in rows on the tarmac, faces blackened, parachutes strapped, weapons checked and rechecked. In a few hours, they will jump into the darkness over Normandy, and many of them will not come back. They know this. They are 20 years old. They are from Kansas and Ohio and Georgia and New York, and they are about to do something that no amount of training fully prepares a person to do. A staff car pulls up. A man gets out. Dwight Eisenhower walks among them alone. No photographers, no press, no ceremony. He stops at groups of men, asks where they're from, what they did before the war. He shakes hands. He looks them in the eye. He says the things that a commander says to men he is sending to die. And he says them knowing that the words are inadequate and saying them anyway, because his presence is the only gift he has left to give. Later, as the planes take off and disappear into the darkness, an aide standing beside Eisenhower will notice that the Supreme Commander's eyes are wet. He goes back to his headquarters. He sits alone. He picks up a piece of paper and writes the message he hopes he will never have to send. It begins. Our landings in the Cherbourg-Havre area have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn the troops. He folds it, he puts it in his pocket, then he waits. This is episode 4, the longest day, and the longest night that came before it. To understand what June 6, 1944 required of Eisenhower, it is necessary to understand what the 18 months before it cost him. Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of German-occupied France, is the most complex military operation in human history. Not the largest in terms of eventual forces committed, not the most costly in terms of casualties, but the most complex in terms of the planning, coordination, deception, and sheer logistical ambition required to give it a chance of success. The margin for error is almost non-existent. The consequences of failure are almost unthinkable. Eisenhower takes command of Overlord in January 1944 and immediately begins rebuilding the plan he inherits. The existing design is too narrow, too few landing beaches, too little weight in the initial assault, insufficient room to maneuver if any of the landings encounter serious resistance. He expands it, 5 beaches instead of 3. More divisions in the first wave, a broader front that gives the invasion multiple axes of advance rather than the single thrust that a concentrated German defense could block. The expansion requires resources that do not currently exist in the quantities needed. More landing craft, more aircraft, more trained airborne troops. All of it has to be argued for, negotiated, obtained from an Allied command structure that has competing priorities and limited patience for the demands of a single operation, however consequential. Eisenhower argues, negotiates, and obtains, pressing his case with the quiet persistence of a man who understands exactly what the operation requires and is unwilling to accept less. The deception operation is as important as the invasion itself, and Eisenhower manages it with the same careful attention. Operation Bodyguard, the umbrella program of strategic deception designed to convince the Germans that the main Allied invasion will land at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy, is a masterwork of misdirection. Fake armies, false radio traffic. Double agents feeding carefully constructed lies to German intelligence. The entire apparatus designed to keep Hitler's best armored divisions away from the Normandy beaches in the critical hours when the beachhead is most vulnerable. The deception requires Patton, the general the Germans most respect and most fear, to appear to be commanding a fictional army group poised to strike at Pas-de-Calais. Patton, who wants nothing more than to be commanding real troops in a real operation, accepts the assignment with the discipline of a soldier, and his visible presence in the southeast of England contributes more to the success of Overlord than any actual combat he might have led in the same period. Eisenhower manages Patton, which is itself a full-time occupation. Patton is the most gifted battlefield commander available and the most personally unreliable, a man whose tactical genius is inseparable from a temperament that generates crises at roughly the same rate that it generates victories. The slapping incident in Sicily, where Patton struck a hospitalized soldier he accused of cowardice, has already cost him a command and nearly cost him his career, and Eisenhower has kept him available at significant political cost because the war needs Patton, and Eisenhower understands this even when he finds Patton exhausting. The weather becomes the final variable that no plan can fully account for. The Normandy invasion requires a specific combination of conditions: a full moon for the airborne operations, a low tide at dawn for the beach landings, wind and sea conditions within the tolerance of the landing craft, and the naval gunfire support. The window of dates that meet all these requirements in June 1944 is narrow: the 5th, 6th, and 7th. Then not again for weeks. In late May, the weather forecasts begin to deteriorate. The weather conference on the evening of June 4th is the most consequential meteorological briefing in military history. Eisenhower gathers his senior commanders, Montgomery, Bradley, Ramsey for the naval forces, Lee Mallory for the air, in the library of Southwark House, the requisitioned English country house serving as Allied naval headquarters. The chief meteorologist, Group Captain James Stagg, presents his forecast with the careful precision of a man who understands that what he says next will determine whether the largest military operation in history proceeds or stands down. The current weather is terrible. June 5th, the original D-Day, is impossible. Winds, cloud cover, and sea state all outside the parameters the operation requires. The good news, such as it is, a narrow window of improvement is possible on June 6th. Not certain, not guaranteed. A brief interlude in a sustained period of bad weather lasting perhaps 36 to 48 hours, during which conditions may be marginally adequate for the operation to proceed. The room absorbs this in silence. Montgomery, characteristically, is for going. Lee Mallory is against. The air conditions are too marginal for his bombers and fighters to operate with the effectiveness the ground forces will need. Ramsey hedges. The room is divided. Eisenhower asks each of them in turn. He listens to everything. He does not reveal what he is thinking while the conversation is happening, which is one of his consistent practices, gathering input completely before committing to a conclusion, ensuring that the people providing the input do not shape their contributions to what they think the commander wants to hear. Then he goes quiet. The room waits. The decision is not complicated. In its logic, it is either go or don't go, and the consequences of each choice are calculable, if not precise. Going on June 6th means accepting the weather risk, the possibility that conditions will be worse than the forecast suggests, that the air support will be degraded, and the seas rougher than the landing craft can handle. Not going means standing down an operation that is already in motion, ships at sea, airborne forces ready, the entire apparatus of the largest military undertaking in history suspended at the last moment, and waiting for the next window, which is 2 weeks away, by which time the secrecy that has protected Overlord may be compromised, and the strategic momentum lost. There is also the human cost of waiting, which is not on any chart, but which Eisenhower has been carrying for days. The men who are ready to go, the paratroopers on the tarmac, the soldiers packed into the landing craft, the sailors who have been sealed in their ships for days to preserve operational security, are at the peak of their preparation and their nerve. War is not only a physical condition, it is a psychological one. The readiness of trained soldiers for a specific operation at a specific moment has a shelf life, and 2 more weeks of waiting is not the same as being ready now. He looks at the forecast one more time. He gives the order. Okay, we'll go. 4 words. The most consequential 4 words spoken in the 20th century. June 6th, 1944. 0:16 hours. The first Allied soldiers touch French soil in the darkness, pathfinders of the 82nd and 101st Airborne divisions jumping ahead of the main airborne force to mark the drop zones. They land scattered, some miles from their intended positions, in the fields and hedgerows of Normandy, in the darkness and the confusion that airborne operations always produce. They begin to consolidate, to move toward objectives, to do the extraordinarily difficult thing of imposing military order on the chaos of a night combat jump into enemy territory. Eisenhower is at his headquarters in Portsmouth. This is the thing about Supreme Command that no subordinate position prepares a person for. The moment the operation begins, the commander's job is essentially over. The planning is done. The orders are issued. The forces are in motion. Whatever happens now happens according to the initiative of thousands of individual soldiers and officers making thousands of individual decisions in the fog and noise of combat, and the commander at headquarters can do almost nothing to influence any of it in real time. He can wait. Eisenhower waits with the particular discipline of a man who has spent his entire career learning to manage the things he cannot control. He reads the reports as they come in, fragmentary, incomplete, often contradictory in the way that combat reports always are in the first hours of an operation. He talks to his staff, he smokes. He smokes too much, has smoked too much for years, and the tension of June 6th does not reduce this. He drinks coffee. He waits. The news from the airborne operations is mixed. The scatter of the drops has produced confusion that was anticipated and that has, in some cases, turned out to be accidentally advantageous. Small groups of paratroopers spread across a wide area have created the impression of a larger force and pulled German attention and resources in multiple directions simultaneously. But the 101st and 82nd have not secured all of their objectives, and the inland flank that the airborne was meant to protect is not as securely held as the plan required. The naval bombardment begins at 5:50. 2,000 vessels, the largest armada ever assembled, shelling 6 miles of French coastline with a weight of fire intended to suppress the German defenses long enough for the assault troops to cross the beach. The assault troops begin hitting the beaches at 6:30. Utah Beach, on the western end of the American sector, goes better than expected. The scatter that plagued the airborne has also placed the first assault wave in a sector where the defenses are lighter than at the intended landing point, and the troops move off the beach with losses that, while not light, are within the parameters the plan anticipated. Omaha Beach is different. Omaha is the most heavily defended beach in the entire invasion sector. The bluffs behind the beach rise steeply above the sand, and the German positions on those bluffs, 352nd Infantry Division, better trained and better equipped than the static garrison troops the intelligence estimated, have clear fields of fire across every meter of the beach below. The naval bombardment, partially ineffective due to cloud cover that obscured the targets, has not suppressed the defenses adequately. The DD tanks, the amphibious tanks meant to provide fire support as the infantry crosses the beach, have been launched too far offshore, and most have sunk in the rough seas. The assault waves of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions cross the beach under fire from positions that are largely intact. The casualties are catastrophic. In the first hours at Omaha, the American assault is in genuine danger of failure. Men pinned down at the waterline, unable to advance, taking fire from positions above them that they cannot reach. Officers dead, units disorganized, the plan dissolving in the face of a defense that is stronger than anyone expected. The German commander at Omaha, watching the carnage on the beach below, concludes that the American assault has been stopped. He is almost right. What saves Omaha is not a plan. It is men, individual soldiers and junior officers who, in the absence of the structure the plan provided, find within themselves the capacity to move forward anyway. A sergeant, a colonel, a lieutenant. Men who stand up on a beach where standing up means dying and start moving toward the bluffs because the alternative is to die, lying down in the sand. Small groups, uncoordinated, following whoever is moving, finding the gaps in the wire and the draws up the cliff face and beginning the agonizing climb. By midday, the bluffs above Omaha are being cleared. The reports reach Eisenhower in fragments through the morning. The picture assembles slowly. Utah going well, the British and Canadian beaches proceeding, the airborne achieving enough of its objectives to protect the flanks, Omaha terrible, and then gradually survivable. By afternoon, the picture is clear enough to conclude that the landings have succeeded. The beachhead exists. It is fragile and contested and will be violently defended, but it exists. Eisenhower takes the letter from his pocket. He does not send it. He puts it back. He will keep it for the rest of his life, a reminder of what was possible and what was asked of him and what the men on those beaches gave so that it would not be necessary. The weeks that follow D-Day are not the liberation that the celebration suggested. The bocage country of Normandy, redrew the ancient hedgerow landscape of dense earthen banks topped with thick vegetation, dividing the fields into small, irregular compartments, is the worst possible terrain for the kind of mobile warfare that Allied doctrine was designed to produce. Every field is a defensive position. Every hedgerow is a wall that tanks cannot easily cross and infantry cannot easily see over. The Germans, fighting on familiar ground with the intensity of men defending their last significant defensive line in the west, contest every meter. The breakout from Normandy takes 7 weeks. 7 weeks of grinding, costly, exhausting combat that the plan did not anticipate and that costs more casualties than the D-Day landings themselves. Montgomery's British and Canadian forces hammer at the eastern end of the beachhead, drawing German armored reserves toward Caen and away from the American sector. Bradley's Americans build strength on the western end, seeking the moment when the German line thins enough to break. Operation Cobra breaks through on July 25th. Patton's Third Army pours through the gap, moving with the speed that Patton considers the only appropriate pace for military operations. The German position in Normandy collapses. Paris is liberated on August 25th. Eisenhower enters Paris with the liberation forces and sees for the first time what the war has been about in the most direct and immediate way. The crowds, the tears, the people who have been living under occupation for 4 years and who receive the Allied soldiers with a ferocity of gratitude that nobody in a headquarters could have anticipated. He is moved. He is not a man who displays emotion easily, but the liberation of Paris moves him in ways he does not try to contain. Then the Germans strike back. December 16th, 1944, the Ardennes forest on the Belgian-German border. 20 German divisions crash through the thin American line in the sector that the Allied command has assessed as the least likely point of attack. Too forested, too remote, too difficult for a major offensive. The assessment is wrong. The attack is massive. The surprise is total. The Battle of the Bulge, the largest land battle in American military history, begins with the worst American crisis since Kasserine Pass. Entire divisions are surrounded. The 101st Airborne, the same men Eisenhower walked among on that tarmac in England, is encircled at Bastogne. The German advance creates a bulge in the Allied line 50 miles deep that threatens to reach the Meuse River and split the Allied forces in two. The Allied command is stunned. Some commanders lose perspective. Some lose nerve. Eisenhower does neither. In the first senior commanders conference after the German attack, Eisenhower looks at the map and says something that stops the room. This situation offers us opportunity. The German army has come out of its defensive positions. It has committed its reserves. It is now exposed in a way that it has not been since Normandy. The right response is not to contain the bulge, it is to cut it off, to surround the German forces that have advanced into it, to turn the German attack into the last significant offensive action Germany is capable of. He gives Patton the order to disengage from his current offensive, turn 90 degrees north and relieve Bastogne. Patton, who has already begun the preliminary planning because he anticipated the order before it came, says he can be there in 3 days. Everyone in the room thinks this is impossible. Patton does it in 4. The Battle of the Bulge ends in German defeat by late January 1945. The German army that emerged from the Siegfried Line to attempt one final decisive blow against the Allies has been ground to pieces in the snow and the cold of the Ardennes. The last strategic reserve of German military power in the West is gone. The road to Berlin is open. Eisenhower did not win the Battle of the Bulge at the front. He won it in a conference room, in the first hours of the crisis, by refusing to see the situation as a disaster when it was actually an opportunity, by maintaining the clarity of strategic vision that separates a supreme commander from everyone else in the room. Episode 5, Victory, and what victory reveals. The camps, the horror. The thing Eisenhower saw in April 1945 that changed him permanently, and the order he gave that he believed was the most important of the entire war. This is Legends of America.